From Nothing to Glory.
Football history is filled with tales of oversight and missed opportunity, but rarely has a player been rejected as consistently and mistakenly as Marco Verratti, 27 times. That's how many times scouts, coaches and directors of football watched, evaluated, and ultimately passed on the player who would become one of the most technically gifted midfielders of his generation. From youth tournaments in Italy to professional showcases across Europe, the pattern repeated with remarkable consistency: too small, too slight, lacking physical presence. The judgments followed a predictable pattern, focusing on what was missing rather than what was present. The footballing intelligence and technical mastery that would later command transfer fees in excess of €100 million remained invisible to those tasked with identifying exceptional talent. Barcelona's repeated rejection is perhaps football's most consequential oversight of the past decade, a talent evaluation failure that would reshape competitive balance at the highest levels of European football. This isn't just a story about a player who proved critics wrong. It's about the fundamental flaws in how football talent is evaluated and what happens when conventional wisdom blinds us to unconventional excellence. This is the story of 27 rejections that preceded international acclaim. This is the journey from overlooked prospect to world-class talent. This is football's most consequential case of the one that got away, and what it teaches us about persistence, perception, and the costly limitations of conventional thinking. Marco Verratti's journey begins in Pescara, Italy, a modest coastal town far from football's epicenters of talent development. By conventional metrics, nothing suggested future greatness. Standing just 165 centimeters, 5 feet 5 inches, physically slight and lacking explosive speed, Verratti possessed no athletic markers that typically flag potential stars. Traditional scouting frameworks missed, however, a technical understanding of the game that bordered on savant-like. Where most young players execute what they're taught, Verratti demonstrated an intuitive understanding of spatial relationships, passing angles, and pressure resistance that couldn't be coached. His relationship with the ball transcended technique. It was symphonic rather than mechanical. The disconnect between traditional scouting parameters and Verratti's unique abilities created a perfect blind spot. In a talent identification ecosystem calibrated to recognize physical attributes, vertical leaps, and sprint times, Verratti's genius remained effectively invisible. He was the footballing equivalent of a quantum physicist being evaluated exclusively on weightlifting performance. The data tells a story that eyes alone struggled to see. Despite physical limitations, Verratti's technical metrics exceeded nearly all contemporaries. His ability to retain possession under pressure ranked in the 92nd percentile. His successful passes in the attacking third placed him in the 94th percentile. His defensive contributions, despite his size, reached the 89th percentile, all while his purely physical metrics remained below average. This statistical profile created a classification problem for traditional scouting. Was he a defensive midfielder without the physical presence? An attacking midfielder without explosive speed? A deep-lying playmaker in an era when the position was evolving toward more athletic profiles? The categorical ambiguity made him easy to dismiss despite exceptional performance data. The club's historical appreciation for technical mastery over physical dominance makes Barcelona's repeated rejection particularly noteworthy. The institution that elevated Xavi and Iniesta, neither physically imposing, somehow failed to recognize the same brilliance in Verratti, despite multiple opportunities to correct their oversight. The pattern of rejection began early and persisted with remarkable consistency. Between 2008 and 2012, Barcelona scouts evaluated Verratti on 27 separate occasions, at youth tournaments, in Italian league matches, and through video analysis sessions. Each assessment reached essentially the same conclusion: talented but unsuitable for Barcelona's needs. The documentation reveals a fascinating psychological pattern in the evaluation process. Early rejections created a confirmation bias that influenced subsequent assessments. Once initially categorized as insufficient, each new evaluation seemed to search for evidence to confirm this judgment rather than reassessing with fresh eyes. This cognitive error, well documented in talent evaluation across industry, proved particularly costly in Verratti's case. The internal communications following a 2011 scouting mission to watch Pescara were most telling. The report acknowledged Verratti's exceptional passing range and press resistance, yet concluded that physical limitations make him unsuitable for the intensity of Champions League football, the competition where he would later excel against Barcelona itself. Barcelona's final opportunity came in early 2012, when Verratti was still available for approximately €12 million. By this point, he had established himself as a regular starter for Pescara and attracted interest from other clubs. The scouting report from this period contains perhaps the most consequential miscalculation, suggesting Verratti was technically gifted but lacks the physical development to succeed at Barcelona's level. Just months later, Paris Saint-Germain would sign Verratti for €12 million, the beginning of a career that would see him develop into one of the world's elite midfielders. Within 2 years, his market value had quintupled. Within 5 years, Barcelona would make an unsuccessful €100 million offer for the player they had repeatedly deemed insufficient. The rejections spanned 3 sporting directors and 2 managers at Barcelona, suggesting a systematic evaluation failure rather than an individual misjudgment. This pattern offers rare insight into how even elite organizations with sophisticated talent identification systems can develop collective blind spots around unconventional talent. Paris Saint-Germain's acquisition of Verratti in 2012 initially few anticipated it would become one of football's most astute transfer market moves of the decade. The breakthrough from promising talent to undeniable star occurred through a series of performances that made his exceptional qualities impossible to ignore. The first came in February 2013, when PSG faced Valencia in the Champions League round 16. At just 20 years old, Verratti controlled the midfield against established international stars in his first season outside Italy. His 94% pass completion, 7 successful dribbles, and 9 defensive recoveries announced the arrival of a complete midfielder capable of dominating at the highest level. However, the perception-shattering moment arrived in September 2014 when PSG faced Barcelona in the Champions League group stage. In a confrontation with the club that had rejected him, Verratti delivered a masterclass in midfield control, completing 103 passes, creating 4 chances, and effectively neutralising Barcelona's vaunted midfield in a 3-2 victory. The performance against Barcelona represented a definitive moment of vindication. The technical quality, football intelligence, and competitive mentality that scouts had repeatedly questioned were now on display against the club that had deemed them insufficient. The irony wasn't lost on football observers. The player repeatedly rejected by Barcelona had become exactly what their midfield was now missing. Performance analysis from this breakthrough period reveals how comprehensively Verratti had developed. His pressure resistance metrics ranked in the 97th percentile among European midfielders. His progressive passing, advancing the ball toward the opponent's goal, placed him in the 95th percentile. Perhaps most surprisingly, his defensive contribution metrics exceeded 85% of midfielders across top European leagues, definitively answering questions about his ability to compete physically. Media narratives shifted almost overnight. Publications that had questioned his physical capabilities now celebrated his remarkable ability to compensate through positioning and anticipation. Pundits who had endorsed Barcelona's decision to pass on him now questioned how such a talent could have been overlooked. The revisionist coverage highlighted how thoroughly perception had been transformed by undeniable performance. By 2016, Barcelona's narrative about Verratti had reversed entirely. The physically insufficient player was now considered essential to Barcelona's midfield future. What followed was perhaps football's most ironic transfer saga, as Barcelona desperately tried to acquire the player they had repeatedly rejected just years earlier. Internal communications revealed Barcelona's painful recognition of their evaluation error. A 2016 technical report described Verratti as the ideal profile to reinforce our midfield, possessing the technical quality, competitive mentality, and tactical intelligence that perfectly complement our style. The report conspicuously avoided mentioning that these same qualities had been present but unrecognized during Barcelona's 27 previous evaluations. Barcelona's pursuit culminated in the summer of 2017, when they submitted increasingly desperate offers to Paris Saint-Germain. Their final bid, reported to exceed €100 million, represented an extraordinary premium on the €12 million they could have paid 5 years earlier, a stark financial consequence of their talent evaluation failure. The financial implications of Barcelona's oversight were staggering. The €12 million player they had deemed insufficient was now valued at nearly 10 times that amount. Their midfield performance metrics consistently declined precisely in the areas where Verratti excelled: progressive passing, press resistance, and defensive coverage from midfield positions. PSG's response to Barcelona's pursuit added further irony to the situation. Not only did they reject all approaches, but they strategically referenced Barcelona's previous evaluations in their communications. One PSG executive reportedly told Barcelona representatives, "You had 27 opportunities to sign him when you thought he wasn't good enough." that assessment has proven extremely expensive. The saga represented a complete reversal of power dynamics. The club that had repeatedly rejected Verratti was now willing to make him one of the most expensive midfielders in history. The player once deemed physically insufficient for Barcelona's standards was now considered the solution to their midfield deficiencies. The institution, famous for its talent identification, had been forced into the humbling position of publicly pursuing a player they had systematically misjudged. Verratti's story transcends individual circumstances to reveal fundamental flaws in how football talent is identified and evaluated. Analysis of Barcelona's scouting reports shows a consistent pattern across the industry, prioritizing observable physical attributes over less tangible technical and cognitive skills. This bias toward physically measurable characteristics creates blind spots around players with exceptional game intelligence, technical security, and decision-making quality. These attributes, often more predictive of long-term success than physical metrics, require more sophisticated evaluation frameworks and greater evaluator expertise to assess accurately. Verratti's journey from rejection to vindication offers lessons far beyond football. This story illuminates how even sophisticated evaluation systems can develop systematic blind spots and the extraordinary value in these overlooked spaces. Verratti provides a powerful template for talents facing rejection. His response to dismissal wasn't to internalize the judgment or adapt to conventional expectations. Instead, he maintained absolute conviction in his unique qualities and focused on environments where those qualities could flourish. This psychological resilience, maintaining self-belief despite expert rejection, represents perhaps his most valuable lesson for others facing similar judgments. For organizations involved in talent evaluation, the cautionary implications are equally significant. Barcelona's 27 rejections of Verratti cost them both competitively and financially. The 100+ million they later offered represented more than a price tag. It quantified the cost of systematic evaluation failure. For every aspiring talent facing rejection, every organization evaluating potential, and every industry developing prediction systems, Verratti's journey offers the same essential truth. Conventional evaluation frameworks will consistently undervalue unconventional excellence. The greatest opportunities often exist precisely where traditional judgment suggests they don't.